Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of the Vampire Diaries, Grimm, Sleepy Hollow, as well as Emerald City. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. That way, if I'm talking about something you don't want to listen to, you can always skip to what you want to hear about. So, for example, if you want to hear what I have to say about the Vampire Diaries, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Grimm, Sleepy Hollow, and or Emerald City. But the first thing we're going to talk about is this week's episode of the Vampire Diaries. A very good episode. Obviously, there's the ending, which I'll work my way up to it, but I will admit, did not see that coming. That, well, like I said, I'll talk about it soon enough. Anyway, running through the episode, we find out what Cade did. Cade traded Elena to Cade, kind of get Cade to back off him, but he also kept the dagger that could kill Cade, as an insurance policy. This way, Cade won't come after him. So Cade is like, hey, proposition to you, Damon. Get me the blade back, and I'll give you Elena back. Which Damon knew he couldn't handle this on his own, so he got Stefan's help to kind of go after Cade, which you have Cade just being an outright douchebag. Well, It's like I said, like, you hate Cade, but at the same time you love him because of his personality. I forgot how quirky Cade can be, and it seems like even more so, and I brought it up, I think, last episode, but I think it's more so than anything, I think it's because I see the actor as Monel, so it's hard to see him as the complete douchebag that is Cade, which granted, he has his douchey moments, but the fact he's on stage and everything, singing and rocking out, and he talks to Stefan and everything, and they end up snapping his neck. Well, Damon ends up snapping his neck, and they end up, getting the dagger and Cade, and they end up taking him to the armory, which turns out later on to be, like, the worst place to take him, because it's like, oh, yeah, because he also kind of explains what's going on with Caroline's children, which is, like, out of anyone he would know, because he was slightly part of the Gemini Covenant. I mean, he really is, but there's no technicality of being kind of outcasting and everything. It's because he's very similar to them. It's like the reason why they're kind of going a little haywire, have been going haywire, is because they're siphoners. They have a very different upbringing than regular witches, like someone like Joe, or probably even someone like Bonnie. Their powers don't really go out of control because they have a very unique approach. The fact is, whether they're conscious of it or not, their bodies are always seeking out. They're always hungry for magic. So that's kind of what they've been doing, because especially here in the armory, because basically there's so many magical artifacts and everything, so they're constantly, like, as Kai even puts it, there's magic in the wall, so, like, it's the worst place for them, because it's like, it's almost, I guess the comparison would be like bringing an alcoholic to a bar. It's, I guess, how you can put the comparison. Just like there's so much temptation around, and it's just like they're so young that they don't understand everything. Like if they were a little older, it'd be a little easier to digest, but it's like, to control themselves. It's almost probably when you actually break it down, it's probably very similar to a vampire's need for blood. It's like once you spend more time, you learn how to control it a little bit, but because they're so young, they don't know, because they're flying, like they're young, and children are very emotional creatures. People in general are very emotional, but especially as a kid, because you don't know how to control your emotions, and your emotions are tied to their powers too. So I don't know if it seems like there was truth to that whole armory thing, but I don't know whether that was just Kai being like, oh yeah, that's kind of the worst. I mean, I think there's some truth to it, but more so than anything, it's like pointing out the fact is, oh, I can get out of here anytime because you idiots brought me to a place filled with magic. It kind of boosts myself up. And then he goes back to trying to kill, like, the kids. I mean, granted, to be fair, like, he did try to kill them before, so why would he change now? Because he's still, like, he's still set in his way of being like, oh, I'm not going to change. He made that very clear last episode, hence the whole doing what he did, trying to make the deal with Cade and everything, kind of not to be involved with everything. So what you end up having is, him trying to finish the job because he has such a problem with his family. I mean, hence the whole reason why he killed Joe and tried to kill the kids in the first place. But now he tries to kill them again, which, Rick, handles it. I mean, I was kind of hoping that Rick would be the one that kind of deal the final blow. But I guess considering Kaizo's situation, like with where things end up in the episode, like I said, I'll get to that soon enough, I guess he can't really die anymore. Like, I guess because when everything was said and done, he's still here, but he's still in that state of like, oh, he can't be killed. Like, because he's not technically living and he's not technically dead. He's kind of in the middle. So I don't think, there's always the other option, but I don't know if this show would get that bloody. has it gotten that bloody before? The whole, like, chopping up a body or something like that. I feel like they did that to somebody, didn't they? Or am I thinking something else? I might be thinking of something else. I swear there was some, like, vampire show where they separate. You know what? That was some From Dusk Till Dawn. I know that for sure. But I feel like I could have sworn they did that to somebody in the Vampire Diaries as well. Maybe I don't know, because I feel like that's a little too bloody for the Vampire Diaries. Do let me know if that came up before. I don't remember. I guess that could be a solution, but it's like they found an easier way to do it, because it's basically like, hey, lock Kai up in a prison. It worked before. This time we'll just make sure that he doesn't have a way out. Then once again, he's all alone and he won't ever have to worry about, the reason why he got out in the first place is because Bonnie and Damon got pushed there, when the other side vanished. So, and now there's no need to concern yourself about that. So, see what happens when you're a douchebag. Granted, the one person that would have never forgiven him was Alara, because it's like, you killed my fiance, and then you also tried to kill my children twice. So screw you. So, but that's why I was almost like, it would have been so good if Alara had been able to kill him. But like I say, in the state he's in, there is no killing him. So that's the best solution. It's the best way to kind of get him out of the way. But anyway, that's one side of the story. The other, well, since I am on the subject of them, there was an interesting thing brought up that basically is like, what do we do with the kids? Because their kid powers are going out of control. And it's like, we can't bring them to a normal school. It's like, so Alart's like, here, the armory, he's going to turn it into a school, not only for them, but probably all supernatural, probably other witches too. Well, there might be some other kids out there who are siphoners, maybe bring up some, witches into it too. I was like, I don't know if you're going to necessarily bring in other supernatural creatures or not, but I mean, more so than anything, probably young witches and people with magic and stuff with powers very similar to theirs. I feel like a perfect person to kind of mix into that would be Valerie, her being a heretic and everything. Maybe she could help out. I mean, that's kind of a thought in my head, because I was like, obviously this episode brought up the fact that old characters are coming back. So, because I've always been constantly wondering, because the last time we saw Valerie is after her and Stefan kind of split and she kind of went off on her own. It's like last season was like the last time we've seen her. So I am curious to know like where she stands now. Like, it is closing down to it. So get to that soon enough. Anyway, the other side of the episode dealt with Stefan and Damon trying to do this whole situation with Cade. Stefan's willing to kill Cade because he takes responsibility, because he's like, because of me, this all happened, because Cade is out because Stefan caused Matt to ring the bell and, almost burning down Mystic Falls, but also gave Cade a chance to get out. I mean, technically it also led to Kai getting out, which I'm still surprised no other people got out, which I am curious. It didn't come up, but I guess it'll be coming up in the next episode or so. It's the whole Dorian situation. We still haven't 100% found out what Dorian has decided. But, Damon's like, no, bro, I'm not about to let you die. It's like, because for one, you trying to kill Cade, it's fine and dandy, but who's to say what will happen? You're human now. He could kill you, drag you off to hell. And then also, if you're not careful, something can happen to Elena. But it's like, for Stefan, he's like, I have to make up for it, because, he's at one point, he's trying to deal, for one, he's trying to earn back Bonnie's forgiveness. At the same time, trying to figure out how, to him, I guess he saw this as an opportunity for ultimate redemption. It's like, he knows he can't be forgiven, but at least this will make great strides of kind of dealing with the current situation. But, Stefan went into it with a plan. He basically got Alart to ring the bell. And, even though he's not a Maxwell, at the very least, the bell still hurts people of their nature. Which, granted, I'm surprised it didn't hurt his kids. But then again, maybe, like, the armory's special and it was able to block this. I mean, I don't know. It shouldn't be, because I swear the tuning fork was used in the armory before, hadn't it? Or maybe it's just like his girls were far enough away, because maybe the armory's kind of outside of town, like relative to any, like in Mystic Falls. Maybe it's not in Mystic Falls, maybe it's outside of it. Maybe, I mean, I don't know. So maybe that's one reason, because like his girls weren't complaining about the sound or something. He wasn't complaining about. So I'm guessing they were outside of the range. That's the only thing that could make sense. So Stefan almost had Cade, but then Cade was like, "Oh, the bell stopped ringing," mainly because Lark had to go deal with the Kai situation because his girls were in danger. Stefan's so close, yet start getting the crap beat out of him. Damon shows up, and then Cade's like, "Okay, choose your brother or the woman you love." Which, Damon's like, I'm not going to make that choice, because for one, he loves his brother, and, he's not going to sacrifice either one of them just to save the other one. And it's like, that's what, once again, gotta bring it up. Like, it's so great to see Damon. Like, he is very, yes, you could argue he's very selfish and he causes a lot of problems, but even then, he's grown a lot over the course of this series. Nowhere near the Damon you knew at the very beginning of the series. Like, obviously, he's always had a selfish point, but he's always tried to do the right thing. Sad thing is, anytime he's tried to do the right thing, it's kind of screwed over other people, yes, but he's always tried to do the right thing. He's doing all this to make up for it, and he's like, all right, Cade, I'll make you a deal. Take my soul, leave my brother and Elena alone, because it's like, obviously you're going to get me and my brother's soul anyway, so why not just wait for him just to die and just take mine right now? So, and Damon does it. I was like, okay, Bonnie's going to show up in time to save. Nope, he kills himself, and then Cade proceeds to well, it ends up turning into a struggle between him and Bonnie, because Bonnie shows up in time because she felt it, because she does have a psychic link to Elena. So that does beg the question: what would happen? We know that if Bonnie died, Elena would obviously wake up. But, I mean, that's also another thing, too. I'm guessing there isn't, like, I doubt even, like, because Kai never actually brought it up. I mean, maybe there never was a way to, I mean, maybe there is a way to reverse it, but from what it seems like, there is no way to kind of reverse it. There probably never was. It's just kind of a one-time deal. Like, legitimately, you just have to wait till Bonnie dies. So, I mean, maybe they'll find something out kind of going towards the end of the series, but I don't know. We have, but what I was thinking was like, what would happen if Elena died? What would that do to Bonnie? I mean, obviously there wouldn't be anything, but they are psychically linked. Obviously she felt her pain, but it's like, would there be any other ramifications for Elena being the one to die? Would that do anything to Bonnie? I mean, that never came up, so I don't know. It's hard to really say. There probably won't be. It's just probably just a situation of like, and Elena's dead. Now, what ended up happening, though, obviously, Damon's kind of caught in the middle between Cade and Bonnie. Bonnie's trying to use her powers to kind of keep Damon's soul, which, Cade's had more experience at this than her, so she's still kind of a newbie at it, which even Damon's like, no, let go, because it's too much for Bonnie, because Cade even says it himself. If you do this, eventually it might break your body or break your mind, because it's too much for her, trying to, like, protect his soul. Which Damon's like, no, Bonnie, you gotta let me go. Because he's like, he's not like, if, this is for saving my brother and for saving Elena, and I'm not gonna drag you down with me. So it's like, this is, he's trying to, even to the very end, trying to protect her. Luckily, he didn't have to worry about that. He just right when, Damon's about to let go, Stefan shows up and kills him, and he's like, and you have Cade being like, I'll see you in hell, and he's like, yeah, but you first. And I like the way it looks when he's dying, like his skin's like turning on, like the cracks across his skin, and it starts turning orange, and he explodes. I was like, and that's the point I was bringing up earlier. I was like, wait, what? We have 2 episodes left. You killed, what? I had a feeling like that's what it was setting up to be. I'm like, but really, you killed Cade? I was like, okay, what does this mean? Obviously, I'll get to that in a second. But I was like, what does that mean going forward? Like, you got rid of the main bad guy. Obviously, another bad guy's got to obviously take his place. I knew something had to come up, but I wasn't 100% sure. But then Damon also got blown back into his body, so that's good. But then I was like, oh, couldn't the same thing happen to Enzo? I was like, oh, right. Enzo's body got burned, so there's no going back for him. He's just constantly stuck in Bonnie's psychic world. I'm guessing that's always where he will be forever until like he passes on or something, which whether or not there's really kind of an app, like, the other side no longer exists, so there's no, I mean, now apparently hell doesn't exist either, because that's the whole thing. You kill Cade, you destroy hell. Turns out that was actually a lie, though, because once you kill Cade, it basically sets hell free. I was thinking like, oh, does that mean like everyone that's stuck inside of Cade's hell was set free? I mean, I think technically that's what it means. I mean, because there was a whole deal that Kai's like, oh, I lost my bet, and it's like, what the hell does that mean? And it turns out that someone else has kind of taken Cade's place now as kind of the ruler of hell. And it seems like that person is Catherine. I was like, wait, what? I should have known. Like, at first, I kind of pieced it together. I was like, he was mentioning, like, oh, a woman that's badder than, like, the baddest bad. And I was like, this could be, like, him referencing Rain. I was like, could this be her kind of coming back? It's like, oh, someone that would want to destroy them. I was like, it could be her. But then he brings up, but the fact is, you saw Elena in a coffin. Not unless that was someone that looked a lot like her, but that looked like that was Nina Dobrev. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like, this entire time, you've never really shown her. I was like, I guess it is leading up to the series finale. So I was like, oh, you're showing her. It's like, now I understand why you showed her, because she's coming back not only as Elena, she's also coming back as Catherine. Which, when was it? It was like a couple episodes ago I mentioned that. Because I was like, oh, that's a storyline they never went back to. It's just kind of like, oh, Catherine's done. She got dragged off behind that door, which I guess now is like, oh, she got dragged off to hell, which was something I was thinking about. I figured I might as well bring it up. Since Cade's whole hell situation existed, doesn't that mean that applies to everyone, even people from the originals? Like, I'm sure if both series were on at the same time, that would kind of coincide. But I'm very curious because I went ahead. I'll probably bring this up later on a different format, but I ended up catching a tiny bit of the preview because I tried to go in blind. I ended up finding out it's like, oh, Klaus's whole situation that season 3 left him in has basically been over 3 years. So I figured I brought that up like during the finale originally. Like I was wondering like would the timeline catch up, and it turns out that's going to be the case. I felt like this is their perfect way of catching up the timeline. So the 3-year time skip that happened last season is now where season 4 is going to pick up of the original. So, but I was wondering, what does that mean going forward? Like, what does that mean? Anyone that died that was part of the supernatural world in the originals, does that mean they were technically in hell too? I mean, especially if they were a vampire or something. I don't know. Maybe that's something they won't really cover because it's just kind of like, oh, that's a little too complicated. It's like, the show is ending, so let's not really get. I don't know, because obviously there's going to be some connections, with this being the end, but, the original still continuing in a shape or form. So I'm just curious about that. But I wasn't expecting that. Catherine, I was like, dude, I literally mentioned her a couple episodes ago, I think. I was like, oh, I never thought they'd do anything with that storyline. I thought it was like, oh, it's done. I was like, no. It seems like they're serving her up as the final bad guy. Maybe. I mean, because like I said, this whole hell situation, so maybe there's other people that got free, other bad people. Like, I mean, who's to say? Like, if you were a bad person, did bad enough stuff and ended up in Cade's hell, it's like, there's a lot of bad people that died, like, over the course of this series that could easily be in there. So I'm very interested to find out what goes forward. I mean, what would this, well, what about the sirens, now that I think about it? I mean, Sybil and Celine, are they dead? I mean, he did burn them, so once you're burned, was that their souls that were burned? Did he burn their flesh and then bring their souls back there? So are they coming back too? Don't know. And what's up with this whole bet that Kai brought up he had with her? I don't know. I'm very curious to see where this goes because now it's like it's coming full circle that Damon now has to face his past once again. This is all about redemption, and it's like this kind of all started with Catherine. That was kind of the main reason for Damon and coming to Mystic Falls in the first place, was to like bring her back or find her. It's kind of what that was all about. So it kind of comes back full circle. It's like she was kind of the beginning of this. I mean, obviously not the real beginning of this, but at the very least in the context of the beginning of the show and everything, she was the beginning of this. She's kind of basically made a lot of events play out the way they have over the course of everything. Everything can gotta be traced back to her. So very interesting to see, especially now that because I was wondering about that. I was like, oh, so because is someone else going to take over his place as a devil? Does that mean Bonnie? That's what I was wondering, since Bonnie is a psychic, would that kind of fall to her? Like I was thinking like, oh, maybe she'd end up killing Cade and then she'd end up becoming the devil or something. I was like, but would that mean she had to kind of enter an antagonistic role? I don't know. I'm very interested to see how that all plays out. I mean, like I said, especially like I said, the Enzo situation, like I'm guessing that's just going to be their current situation. Then you have Caroline and Stefan getting married. She brings up the good question like, but you're human now, and he's like, well, yeah, but that means I get this, spend the rest of my life. I can get older with my best friend, the woman I love, to help her raise her children, and help raise their children's children. So it's a beautiful thing. It's like finally, kind of move past all your issues, because once again you had Damon being very optimistic, and once again just part of Damon changing, being like, yo, bro, I'd like to believe that redemption is, you're not the only one that has a long list of redemption. Doing it by yourself isn't going to solve anything. He's like, I have a long list of redemption stuff on my table, that I have to redeem myself for because I've done a lot of bad things. But he's like, he's able to do it because he has the people he loves around him. He's had someone like Elena, all their friends, and even Stefan. Like, he needs them by his side to do this. And he's like, you need the person that you love most, by your side, that being Caroline. So just a very good episode, and like I said, like I mentioned it, we've only got 2 episodes left. Very interested to see how this all winds down. Where we're going forward with this whole Catherine thing. I mean, obviously they made her human, like, because she's always been kind of like wanting to be the top of the top, like she knows, especially because she's always had a bit of a hold over Damon and Stefan. So it's definitely going to be interesting, especially if she kind of has like what comes with the fact is that she's taken over hell, and how did she manage to take over hell? Like, was there like a metaphorical like crown or throne that Cade gave up when he died? I mean, now that hell technically, I mean, hell was because I was thinking like, oh, hell is technically dead. I was like, no, because Kai lied about it. It doesn't die. Maybe it, like I said, it seemed like he said kind of like, I forgot what the exact word to use, but it does seem like it more so bursted open that, it's just kind of free reign. So I can only assume now that, like I said, a lot of people from hell are kind of crossing over in our world. I guess Catherine would too, because it's like there should be no other way for her to get here. Like I said, not unless she somehow psychically got like a lot of powers like Cade did. So it's so many questions. Very interested to find out, to see where this plays out. And now moving on to this week's episode of Grimm. A very interesting episode on so many levels. The first thing, I'm just going to talk about the main case, which was a very different case this week because it wasn't Hank and Nick as usual. This time, Nick had to deal with the whole checking up on Eve's situation, which he refers to her as Juliet. Even Wu was like, whoa, did he just call her Juliet? And Hank was like, yeah. So that's interesting, but I'll kind of circle around to that. But going back to the case, it's mainly Wu and Hank dealing with this case. It's kind of the first time Wu's kind of been at the forefront of the case, kind of working it. So that was kind of cool. But this case deals about some scientists basically getting killed. It turns out that basically they brought one of the scientists, his name was Shelley, his son died in a car accident, and basically they brought him back to life. Essentially, they were buying body parts from this cremation dude who's supposed to be cremating bodies, which he's such a weird dude in a way. He was just kind of like the way he was like when Hank and we were kind of interrogating him. He was just like, they offered me $6,000. He's like, oh, they're like, don't ever do this again. He's like, I promise I won't. Oh, I learned such a good lesson. It's like, no, you didn't. Like, I don't think you learned anything from this. Just like, I don't know, it's just the way he acted. He acted like he was scared, but at the same time, he wasn't scared. Like, it was just so weird the way that character acted. It was just kind of interesting. It was kind of like, it was like fear, but at the same time, it's just like, oh my God, I promise. But also somewhat stoic. It's hard to explain. But it turns out he had sold some body parts. These body parts turned out to be Vessin body parts, which obviously everyone involved didn't know that. So they just look at, Shelley's son as some monster, which Shelley was supposed to kill him, but he didn't. And, he probably thought he could keep this whole situation under control, keep his son under control. I mean, you can, he even tries to explain it to Hank later on. He's like, the fact is that was my son. It's like, but you crossed the line that you shouldn't have got crossed with. You meddled with something you shouldn't have meddled with. He's like, is it so wrong that I wanted to bring my son back? It's like, yeah, because you bringing your son back. For one, that's not even your son. You turned him into something he never was. It's like, whatever was left of your son is gone because you turned him into this quote-unquote monster. And also because of that, two of your other colleagues, two other people are dead. So at the very least, it wasn't like they went out of their way trying to start off with this experiment. It was actually Shelley's idea to create, trying to bring his son back, and he just went along with him. An interesting thing, because obviously this has got the whole Frankenstein theme to it. What is interesting is his last name is Shelley, and his first name is Victor. Shelley, from Mary Shelley, the writer of Frankenstein, which, like I said, this whole story centered around, plus Victor is the name of Frankenstein's name. Because there's always the most well-known misconception, and it's a misconception I have for the longest time. We always thought the monster was Frankenstein, but it's like, no, the monster is called Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein is the doctor who worked on him, in this case that being Victor. So, and also because it also ties in with the quote at the beginning of the episode. It's like, no man starts off wanting to be evil. Evil happens basically when he's trying to find happiness. Obviously I butchered that, but I know that specific. I was like, oh, that's a Mary Shelley quote. I know that because I put it up on somewhere like years ago, and I've always kept it there. So like the moment I saw that, I was like, huh, that's kind of interesting. Oh, Mary Shelley. And then like you had this whole Frankenstein thing. So there's probably like, obviously a lot of the, things are kind of taken from different stories. Like a lot of times probably from Grimm stories that they're probably like quotes from the actual Grimm brothers, like the Grimm tales and stuff like that. So obviously, some of them I'm more familiar with than others, I'm sure. Like, I can't give you an exact example because I tend to forget a lot of them. But if you take time to sit down and kind of read it and you like, oh, obviously it kind of tells you ahead of time what the whole episode's kind of about. Like, this being a perfect example of like, hey, it's not like he started off wanting to be evil and his son didn't want to be evil, but he was a grieving man and they try to bring his son back to life. Which at the end of it, he ends up killing his son. But he tried to kill himself, but Hank is like, no, you're not going to do that. You're not going to just take the easy way out. Like, you have to take responsibility responsibility because all this happened because of you. Yes, I get it. You were grieving, but you shouldn't have done what you did because it cost 2 people their lives. And plus, it's like it turned his, like in the end, it was all futile because it's like your son's back to being dead. But I mean, who could also say like your son's been dead the entire time because that isn't your son? It's just parts of his brain are there, but that's not who he is. Like you could argue maybe his soul is gone, so, I mean, really comes down, from a philosophical, maybe even philosophical, but more so probably like a religious standpoint of where you stand on the whole concept of a soul. So another side of this episode dealt with that creature again. We have Eve kind of looking at her like because Eve, it's kind of like Eve's kind of got to the point she has an identity complex because she was looking in the mirror and she's like, who were you? Who are you? Like she has the memories of Juliet and she remembers everything that ever happened and she did as Juliet, but it was like for her, Juliet was always a distant person. So she doesn't really know that person. But the sad thing is she doesn't even know who she is anymore because it's not even just Eve anymore. Because as Eve, she had a clear picture of like, oh, this is who I am. Even though it's kind of a created persona, it still was something like, oh, this is definitely who I am. It gave her she knew who she was and she kind of accepted it. Now she's kind of in the middle because she's kind of partway Juliet. Now she's also kind of partway Eve. It's like, who is she now? For the longest time, it seemed like since getting recovered by the stick, she wasn't able to vogue. But obviously, kind of getting to what her side of the story, she ended up getting attacked by the monster. It popped up in the mirror. She broke the mirror, but then the mirror reassembled itself, and then it reached through the mirror and grabbed her. And at first, she seemed like she couldn't vogue because that's been a thing. Like, she can't really access her powers since everything has happened. But then all of a sudden, she was able to vogue. She bit it, and then it just gave up. So I don't know whether it was that the monster's blood on the mirror or was it Eve's blood, but nevertheless, it kept it from coming back. I mean, kind of coinciding with the whole like, oh, not knowing who I am, Eve, Juliet, who I am, who I was, who I am now, kind of coincides with that. Is the fact is that she didn't want to stay with Nick anymore, more with him and Adeline, because she won't admit it, but it's super awkward. I mean, I'm sure last episode probably didn't help. Probably they haven't referenced it, but I'm sure that's still kind of messing with her a little bit in her head, like, oh, being that way about Nick, especially because it seems like she's already conflicted, because the beginning of the last episode kind of already pointed out that she probably still has feelings for Nick, but she won't act upon them because it's like, well, she feels like she doesn't deserve to because things have changed. He's with Adeline, plus she's not the same person. She's not Juliet anymore, at least, she doesn't feel like she's Juliet, so. And once again, I brought up, earlier, the whole Nick calling her Juliet thing. Obviously there's something there, and it's very interesting because it does seem like she is, like, with each episode is passing, it does seem like she's becoming more and more Juliet, because it seemed like I said, it's Eve. She didn't really have much of a personality that was really apparent last season, but it's like this season it seems like we're seeing more of who she was as Juliet kind of slowly take over, just the way she talks, the way she acts, because previously she was very stoic and just very like focus on what she needed to do, but now we've seen a little bit of that kind of fading away. So there is also the whole situation because Renard is looking into the symbols and he ends up getting a friend. It's like she basically couldn't really tell whether it was like something good or something bad, but she knew she's like, more likely it's something bad, because it's basically saying like it's some ancient prophecy talking about something coming. And basically the fact is that Diana can see the symbols means that in some shape or form, she's connected to all of this. I mean, she's probably one of the most powerful vessels around too, so that's probably not a coincidence. So I'm thinking, her being one of the most powerful vessels is probably connected to the reason why she can see the symbols in the first place. She's special. Which also makes me wonder, does that mean Nick's connected to this? Because all those symbols and stuff are connected to the cloth, and the stick is connected to him. But like I said, is it because he's a Grimm that it attached to him? Is Nick special in some regard the reason why it attached to him? Or is it just because Nick was like the first one to really grab onto the stick, so it's kind of taking an interest in him in that regard? It seems like it's all connected because, like, they brought up, like I said, the words kind of always associate with that thing. It's like destruction, because it's like, it's kind of miracle and destruction, and I can only assume it's connected to that creature. Maybe that thing they saw in their mirror, like I said before, I was like, oh, is that supposed to be like the Vessin version of death? Maybe it's kind of like a sealed away Vessin god or something, or maybe just a Vessin in general that was sealed away that is slowly trying to return. Maybe it's like some kind of ancient evil, because something that was referenced at the beginning of the episode is the fact is that there were some artists from back in the day that kind of did a rendition. Like, basically, they're like pagan, I don't know if they're necessarily gods, but creatures at the very least. And you're like, oh, they're kind of rough interpretations of Vessin. So it's kind of like, so this thing is from another world and maybe it's a Vessin. And now these drawings kind of, even Monroe was like, oh, maybe it kind of means, because Rosalie is like, oh, so you're saying that Vesson from a different world? He's like, I'm not saying that, but at least this artist was kind of thinking, and that artist was also a Grimm. So, because it does beg the question, like, how is it that Vesson and humans exist? Like, where do Vesson originally come from? Are Vesson originally humans that, something came over them? Like, were they possessed by some creatures from another planet and that gave birth to Vesson? Or is it like Vesson themselves are from a different world? Not necessarily like aliens, but maybe from another dimension, as it seems like this thing might be. So many questions on that front, and it's like that could lead down so many paths. I mean, at least that's what that seems like that's leading to. But like I said, this is interesting because now we have Renard looking into it too. So it makes you wonder, will he tell Adeline and Nick about it? Maybe he'll even be able to help them figure this all out. I mean, because Renard's going to have to be a part of this anyway, because Diana's in the center of it now too. So, I mean, obviously they still think it's a secret that they're keeping, but obviously, Renard's part of it. So for now, he's just going to keep watching Diana, probably try and get some more information from her, because he knows about it being an atonal, but he doesn't know that it's part of Nick's loft and everything. Not unless Diana accidentally lets that slip, so. That'd be kind of interesting, because like I said, like even in amongst everything, like no one actually, that's a question that's never really been answered. Like, where exactly do Vesson come from? How do they exist? It was just kind of like Vesson's a human. That's it. That's all there was ever been to it. At least to my knowledge. I don't ever remember that ever coming up. I don't even know if Nick ever really asked. I don't know. Maybe his Grimm books brought it up. It's just kind of like it's part of their reality and always has been. And why is it that? I mean, because also the question is, why is it that, I mean, maybe that's another thing that was coming up too, and I just don't remember. It's like, why is it that what's a Grimm's connection to Vesson? Why is it that a Grimm can see what they really look like? Obviously, it's a bloodline thing, but a bloodline from what? Were they like cursed, and it's a cursed thing that kind of passes down from generation to generation, stuff like that. It just makes you wonder. Also in this episode, you had to, Nick stayed by Eve's side the entire time, and it started putting things in perspective, because we saw like kind of a flash of like everything that's happened to them over the course of everything. Obviously at the very beginning of the series, his aunt is like, yo, you're a Grimm. Maybe you should distance yourself from Juliet, because it's like you don't want to get her involved. Then there's like his mom being like, oh, don't push people away, because she made that mistake. Like, pushed away the people she cared about. Like, she wasn't around for Nick growing up, her husband died and everything. Nick's dad died. It's kind of a sense of like, because of this whole Grimm world, she kept everyone at a distance, even Nick. So it's kind of a situation where she's like, don't make the mistake I made. Oh, don't keep people in dark. Don't push people away. Keep people close. And then also thinking about the fact that when he originally told her, obviously he told her before she was, kind of put under that sleeping spell by Adeline. So she kind of thought it was kind of a hazy dream before she's, that was before the whole, like, them being, Renard and Juliet being obsessed with each other thing. That was like season 2, wasn't it? I think that was like season 1 going into season 2. Like, that was like how season 1 ended, I think. Her, like, ending up in that sleep spell coma. At least I think. I don't remember. I think so. Nevertheless. And also about, her being part of the reason why his mom died, and then her, Juliet dying in his arms. So it's kind of, like I said, it's kind of coming from both ways of just like I said, brought up again, the whole him calling her Juliet thing. So it's like part of his, I'm thinking it's also because he's kind of blaming himself, because I guess in his eyes, he's like, it's just, they've been through a lot. So I guess seeing her like that kind of scares him. I guess it puts it in his perspective for him, being like, he does still care for her, because seeing her like that, like he immediately rushed off when he found out she was hurt. So, and also what does that, is that him questioning his own situation, being like, maybe if he had never brought, if he had just done what his aunt said and just distanced himself from Juliet, maybe none of this would happen, so maybe he blames himself on that front too. So, and then another kind of small storyline that kind of popped up that I thought was kind of interesting was how Monroe had that random dream about like Rosalie giving birth. Like, she wakes him up and it's like her belly's big, and I'm like, wait, what? He's like, that's not possible. You're not supposed to do this early. Like, that's not possible. She's like, well, it's not like our situation is exactly normal. She starts giving birth, and he's like, oh, 1, oh, it's so great. I was like, all right, there are more, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, just stop. And he wakes up and he's just like in a cold sweat and everything. She's like, are you okay? He's like, yeah, I'm fine. Obviously, it's a situation representing the fact it's like, oh, he's scared of fatherhood and stuff like that, especially because he's going to be taking care of 3 young ones. Or is that supposed to mean that there's a lot more to that situation? Like, I guess in his mind, it's supposed to be like a nightmare representing the fact is, oh, he's scared because he doesn't know if he's properly equipped to handle. Like, 1 baby, fine, but it's like 3? Dealing with triplets? And or maybe it is legitimate being like, hey, because they don't necessarily have a normal pregnancy. Because not only are they Vestin, they're also different Vestins. So I don't know if that really would make any difference. Maybe it's connected to the mirror because, I mean, Rosalie brought it up that it's not necessarily a special mirror per se. That mirror is a mirror she's always had, you know? It's something she's had since she was a little girl and her parents would take her to the spice shop. And also, it was the mirror Nick looked in when he was trying, you know, it's like, oh, this is what you look like as Renard. So, I mean, so is it like, because it seems like specifically this thing is coming after specifically Eve. Not sure. I mean, obviously the biggest reason because she's connected to that world, you know, because what she saw with the death grip. So maybe it's because she kind of crossed that line and now it's like, yo, you crossed that line because of the death grip. You were almost mine. Your soul was almost mine. Now it's like, now I have to get you. Or is it something else? Also, like I brought it up earlier, the whole Eve situation, like about her being able to vote, is that like a full on, back on type of thing? Or does she have to really focus to bring it out? Like, is she, because I mean, obviously it seems like whatever the stick did, it kind of seems like she is turning more human than Vessin, but it does seem like it is still inside of her. So, I mean, like I said, episode presented a lot of questions. It's going to be very interested to see where we go next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Sleepy Hollow, a very good episode where the main threat was basically something known as a fire flu. Basically, back in the day, there was a dude named Paul Jennings who basically dealt with this kind of, in Washington specifically, that basically there was like a message that it was kind of cursed. Anytime anyone read this pamphlet, their body would get like these markings and eventually they kind of burst into flames. It turns out this is all connected to a jinn. Which, you know, we kind of refer to as a genie. Obviously, it's a very different version. Like, in this one, it's not even like, oh, a jinn that grants, you know, wishes or whatever. This one in particular was just kind of like, it just feeds its own desires. I was thinking like, oh, is there kind of a wish situation going? I guess it's kind of a, because I think certain things kind of divide jinns up. Like, I think there's probably some wish granting jinns and then there's just, you know, just subcategories of monsters, you know. So the overall creature is the jinn, but there's probably multiple types. I mean, that's what I'm thinking of, because I feel like, you know, that the wishing aspect should be associated with the not less it's associated with another monster in like the Sleepy Hollow universe. But nevertheless, essentially this thing, like, basically there was a message that was being sent around through the internet that basically once people watched the video and saw the symbol, it would like the curse would activate for them. So it was a more modern version of this curse. And basically, like I said, fire flu, because basically it burns people. Like, there was the dude Alex was on her Tinder date with, which is kind of interesting way to kind of, one of the interesting ways to kind of jump into this case like that was the fact is that like his, like, obviously when he was in the hospital, a person was trying to hold him down, but then like he burst into flames and that person got burst into flames too. Like, they turned into like crispy lumps of just like not even burnt ash. It was almost like you just burnt them and they got stuck inside of like a hardened mold of themselves. That's kind of what it looked like. An interesting thing about, because I brought him up earlier, Paul Jennings, an interesting thing about him is that he actually worked in a place that the team works out of, this Vault 335, that basically him, Sacagawea, the dude that basically is Uncle Sam, and I think Davy Crockett, all 4 of them worked together out of this particular place. Like, they're the ones that kind of ran it. They were kind of like the supernatural, I guess you can, I mean, put in perspective, it's almost like they were kind of the Ghostbusters of their time, essentially. They're that time's version of the current team, you know, that we know here in Sleepy Hollow. I mean, on Sleepy Hollow, so. But what's really interesting about the Jinn, how it works, is basically the curse would drive you to go search him out. Because basically he gets to you and he drains out your life force. That's kind of his thing. But like if someone restrains you or whatever, you end up burning and bursting into flames and dying. And it turns out, sadly, one of the people affected is Alex. Which this episode was a very good one about learning about Alex and Jake. It was kind of a, obviously not too much about their past, but more so who they are now. Like, for instance, the whole like reason why she was on a Tinder date is because her and Jake kind of have a thing where it's like, hey, we go on a Tinder date, we're there for each other, that way if anything ever goes wrong, we're there to kind of help bail out the other one. So it's like, real friend thing. Except for Jake, things didn't work out. His Tinder date kind of bailed on him, but he was chatting up Missy, the bartender. I'm curious if that's going to turn into something else. Because I also brought up, I'm wondering about him and Alex thing. It's like, obviously they're friends, but it seems like it might be one of those situations like it might cross over there, but it might be the situation also like, nah, we've known each other for too long that it'd be weird and gross to kind of cross over. So, I mean, but also the fact is we learned about, apparently Jake is actually a big germaphobe because he was freaking out. He's like, okay, no, we can't be like, no, this might be some disease or something. He's just up there sanitizing his hands repeatedly. It's like, oh man, this might be some. It was just like, it was interesting seeing him like that. Also, that little conversation he had at the end with Crane and Diane. He's like, okay, if this goes bad, if I end up dying, like basically he has like this toy collection of basically toys that are like still in their boxes, and he's like, if I end up dying, make sure this collection stays in the boxes. Make sure no kids get their grubby, dirty fingers on them. He's like, promise me that, and they're like, okay, so okay, I can do this now. So it's like that's one of the last things you want it to be put out there, like protect my collection. Don't let any grubby kids. Make sure it stays pristine and everything. So as we kind of learn, Jake is a bit of a nerd, but what they ended up finding out is basically about this gene. Because originally the person who wanted, Jake ended up infecting himself because, obviously Alex got infected and he was trying to chase after her. Because initially Alex distances herself, gets away from it because she doesn't want to hurt Jake or anyone else. Because, when they catch on fire, if there's enough stuff around, and I guess if the heat burns hot enough, certain things start lighting on fire, like she could end up destroying the vault. So that's another reason why she left too. But more so than anything was to protect them so they wouldn't get caught up in, especially Jake. But Jake didn't want to leave her side, obviously. I'm very curious to find out more about their past, like how they became friends and everything, like how far their history goes back. But nevertheless, Jake infected himself when originally it was Crane who wanted to do it, because it's something that does come up, because Crane is like, he wanted to do it because he was like, as the witness, it's his job to do this, take upon these tasks, because he can't ask anyone else to do it, because he's like, basically Crane looks at it as, this is my fight and you all got dragged into it, and it's like, I'm not going to take the risk that any of you might die. So if anyone's going to take the risk, it should be me. I am the witness. I'm one of the witnesses, so I should take this upon myself. And not even the sense of like, oh, Molly's also a witness and she should take it upon. It's like, no, she's a young witness. And it's like, for him, it's a situation where Crane wants to try and take on everything himself because he, there was that whole, what was that circumstance about? Was it about that? Yeah, it was the whole like trial in his head thing that basically, he was worried that everyone around him was going to die. So that basically he was going to be he's already lost people around him, so he just doesn't want to have a repeat of that situation. So he's being extremely cautious going forward. He was always cautious before, but even more so now because it's like, it's already happened and he doesn't want it to repeat itself. He's already lost so many people because of this battle that he's been a part of. But Jake takes it upon himself, which he ends up saving Alex because she was about to be next up on the list. But before like Jake could be taken by the djinn, she saves him too. And it's pretty badass how they actually take care of him too, because like the whole point was like to create a storm. That's how they actually get rid of the djinn, which you have Crane using the electricity and shocking the hell out of him. So. And luckily, everyone was kind of able to everyone came out of this okay. You even have Alex giving Jake a hug, which he was kind of like, okay, are you sure you're okay? She's like, just shut up and just let me do this. So I don't know whether, to me, the way he was acting about it and the way she was kind of acting, it seemed more like a situation where it seems like Alex probably isn't the most affectionate type, so hugging Jake like that was probably something out of the ordinary for her, just the way she was acting. So, which I can understand. I'm not the most affectionate person either. I'm weird when it comes to showing affection to people. I can probably like count on one hand like the number of people I've hugged outside of family. So I'm weird like that. So I guess I can kind of relate to that on some level. Maybe it's stuff connected to her past that makes her a little less reluctant to open up to people, or, she might not be that person, might not be something specific from her past that makes her like that, nevertheless. And it's always interesting seeing Crane kind of tapping into, modern technology when he's taking a selfie of them, like kind of representing the picture that's taken of obviously the group that originally ran 335, Jennings, Sacagawea, and so on. basically kind of having a picture of their own to remember, like, hey, this is their battle now and everything. There's also a letter that Crane ended up finding from Washington. Basically, back in the day when this group was originally formed, it was actually Crane who was actually supposed to lead it. Because it was like he was already being, because I think Crane's, Abby's dad brought that up last season about the fact is that Crane was supposed to lead an army group specifically, that Washington put together, and it seems like this is that particular group that Crane was supposed to be the leader of it. And it's like, so technically he's the leader of this 335 vault, but for him it's like he has his reservations, which he talks to Diana about. It's like, like I brought up earlier, he can't trust himself, because it's like he doesn't want to drag everyone into this fight, which everyone's here of their own free will. Like, he didn't force this upon anyone. He didn't make Molly a witness. He didn't make Diana kind of get brought up in this supernatural world. It's just it managed to find its way to him, to her, and to them all. So it just happened to work out like that. I mean, it's hard to say. It comes down to whether you believe in fate or not, or destiny. Like, they were destined for this, which might be a good thing, might be a bad thing. I mean, when you look at destiny and fate, Crane probably looks down upon. I mean, he'll probably say he looks at it in a very prideful manner, but then, in retrospect, like I said, of everything he's lost, that, taking Abby, for example, she was brought into this world because she was destined to be a witness. It was her destiny and everything. And it's like, now that means she's going now. So it's like, was her destiny to die, so I'm sure the terms fate and destiny kind of leave a sour taste in his mouth to a certain degree. I mean, because it's because of fate and destiny that he didn't grow up in his, his time, that he's here in the present day. Granted, if it wasn't for him being in the present day, he wouldn't know the team that he knows now. I think I even brought that up. Was that last episode? I've recently brought it up in one of these Sleepy Hollow episodes. So for now, he's not taking charge. He's like, yo, we're just going to act together as a team. Like, I'm not trying to be the leader. He's like, that's kind of something for another day. For now, it's just like, let's enjoy our comrades, because he just can't trust himself to give out the right orders to make sure, because, I mean, Diana's like, the fact is that people die in a war. Like, it's a sad truth. And it's like, losing people, that's something a commander has to get used to. And just for now, Crane's like, he's not going to take that responsibility. He's like, he will be a comrade in arms, but he won't be a commander, because that would mean deciding, almost having to choose who lives and who dies, making those hard decisions. And he doesn't want to be there yet. Now, another element to this episode deals with the whole Dreyfus situation, which is also connected to Molly, because Jenny ends up getting Molly to take a test of some sort to basically decide what path she's going to go down. It can be used by anyone, but, specifically you want to help Molly decide what she's going to do as a witness. And she ends up basically picking the path of an oracle. And she ends up circling the bowl, and she sees a vision of the future, which is what the episode started off with. It's the same vision that Dreyfus himself has been having. I guess it's kind of like coming along with his new powers, that basically he has kind of taken over America. It seems like he's got his own, like, he's sitting out in front of the White House, it seems, and there's like a much older Crane in front of him, which kind of taps into the fact that he has immortality and stuff like that. I mean, I'm talking about in Dreyfus's case, but it's like a sense, it seems like Crane doesn't have anyone, like he's just kind of the last survivor of his group, kind of representing that like whole thought of, oh, maybe everyone's dead, but he's basically taken over at least here in the U.S., like whether he's a 100% worldwide conquest, like he likes to think of himself, he's like, oh, think of me as like an emperor or a czar. But he's like, or a monarch, and but Crane's like, you're a tyrant, kind of basically destroying the fundamentals of everything that the U.S. was built around, and kind of just ruling it his own way. Like I said, just like a small peek into it, but it seems like Dreyfus has been having these visions a lot more recently. But like I said, also Molly ended up seeing him, just because it seems like that's what's going to be her role going forward. It's more so the oracle, like, of trying to see into the future. And it seems like to a certain degree she might be able to interact with it, because she's like, hey, are you okay? And then like Crane turned and looked at her. So it's like, it's almost like she can send her mind to the future, I guess. I mean, it's a possible future. Whether, as other things with time travelers have brought up, not everything is set in stones. There's so many different directions and paths life can go down. Granted, Dreyfus is so damn sure that he's like, yeah, I can do this. He's like, because he's bringing up to Joe, he's like, you really think that team of nitwits can stop me? No way. Like, the fact is, I've already seen it, but the thing is, like, he's so steadfast in his belief that, like, oh, things are going to work out that way. But it's like, that belief is going to cost you very dearly. I mean, especially because if they have Molly there, they're kind of warning them what's coming. things can change. I mean, granted, we really don't know. Maybe in this, things are set in stone that like things are going to be a certain way. So it's going to be very interesting going forward. Also ended up finding out that basically there's like a super popular kid played by Robbie A.K. His name is, the character's name is Logan. But, I was like, oh, dude. If you're unfamiliar, Robbie A.K. plays Peter Pan on Once Upon a Time. He also played Tommy/Nathan, which is kind of, me saying that's kind of a spoiler if you never saw it, but Heroes Reborn, which I'm super sad that was like so short-lived as it was. I was really super excited for that, especially like if they had come out with the season 2. But nevertheless, that's nor here nor there. No, but it seems that he was actually part of this. Because it seems like Dreyfus is putting together his own team, and Logan's like that whole curse situation, what he got from it was Logan's like, man, I can feel all this power. So I'm guessing all the people, the Jinn, because I was wondering, because I was like, he didn't pop up in the episode, and now it's like, what role did he play in it? And it's like, oh, apparently he's a bad guy. He's working with Dreyfus. Like, was he originally a bad guy, or is he becoming one? Like, what is that case? Like, is Logan even really Logan? Could it be a demon inside of Logan or something? Whatever the case may be, it seems like after it was all said and done, he probably fed on the power the Jinn had gathered up from all the people it had killed and absorbed their life form from. I wonder, does that include people who just blew up anyway? Nevertheless, I'm wondering, because obviously Dreyfus is, like he said, forming a team of its own, and Logan's one of them. What I'm also curious about is to find out whether or not he's trying to create a 4 horsemen situation of his own. That's going to be very interesting, because I think I brought that up like, oh yeah, we never really got the other horsemen, so what if he's trying to create his own version of the 4 horsemen? Like, I'm still going back to it. Like, I brought it up last episode again, because now I'm just even more confused. What does Joe get out of this? I mean, granted, maybe if he has someone powerful like Dreyfus on his side, like, because, it seems like Joe might be a low-level demon, obviously doing contracts and stuff like that. Maybe not necessarily low-level, but he's not the top of the top. So maybe working with Dreyfus will get him, the top, top reign of the demon world or something like that. Like I brought up my theory last episode that maybe he's trying to hollow Dreyfus out for someone else to possess his body or something like that. That was what I threw out last episode, but I mean, it's really still too early to tell, but I'm very interested to find out what this is all about. Like, who are these other people he's got on his team? What does this mean going forward? Because Molly has a thing like, oh man, she so likes Logan. It's like, oh my god, he's amazing and everything. But it's like, now we know that he's a bad guy. I mean, at least we know. Obviously, the team doesn't know yet. But it seems like there are going to be some very interesting developments going forward. And now moving on to this week's episode of Emerald City. So a lot of stuff went down. We kind of picked up where the last episode left off with the Kingdom of Ev versus basically the Wizard. It came down to like the Wizard's like, hey, these are my guns. And they're like, no, they're not. They're our guns now, so get out while you still have your life. And so basically the Wizard's offering gold. He's like, oh, here's all this money. Now give us the guns, which I love Langwidere's response to basically like, okay, we'll take the gold and keep the guns. From her reasoning, obviously this is all about revenge. It's because she went along with it because she saw how powerful guns were, because she felt like, well, with guns, it's like they don't have to worry about the beast forever. They can take care of it themselves. That's the whole reason why the Wizard has these weapons, because it's like, oh, these can kill the beast forever. And it's like, okay, they're in our possession, so we don't have to worry about giving them to him. But at the same time, it turns out that, she's like, her main motive is also revenge, because she brought it up before. She wants to see Emerald City burn, because when the beast forever attacked last time, it killed a lot of her family, in particular her mother, and it's like the Wizard protected his city but didn't help protect her kingdom. So now she's like, hey, basically screw you, we got the guns, so we'll be able to protect ourselves. Also, this money will mean less money you have to be that can be used to repair your city after it's all said and done. But sadly, it turns out the whole thing was a trap. I guess even though the Wizard does seem like the Wizard is smart. You got to give him that. Even though he is a jerk, he is pretty smart. So the other chests that were there were filled with his people, and they basically took over. But, which Langwidere isn't like, oh, she kind of actually shows no fear, but considering what you find out later on in the episode, which I'll get to soon enough, it kind of makes sense, I guess, why she showed no fear. But basically, the Wizard's even like, he like smacks her because like she's like not backing down, because she's like, you can't kill me, because if you kill me, that means my soldiers will kill your man, and that means you'll have even less forces to deal with. Not only will you have a problem with my kingdom, you'll also have less men to deal with the beast forever going forward. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation for you. which, like I said, he smacks her, which is just kind of a big no-no, and ends up breaking her mask to the point she, like, hides her face and everything, and he talks down to her, almost being like, oh, now pick a proper mask and put on some proper clothes and meet your men, basically, because he's trying to make her go like, oh, everything's okay, yes, we will reluctantly work together. I thought it was going to be some kind of twisted situation where he's like, yeah, to make this piece go through together, it's like, oh, we're going to get married or something like that. I mean, that's typically how crap like this works. A great example, the whole Jafar and Jasmine from Aladdin is kind of an example of that. The point was to marry her so that he could be the Sultan in that situation. So I thought maybe something similar like that. Turns out not to be the case. Which we do see Langwidere's face for the first time. And I mean, obviously, the actress who plays her is very lovely and pretty, which isn't too much of a surprise. Because, like I said, you can see most of her face all the time, but it's just like, obviously, it's a little obstructed. But Jack, wanting to protect her, goes to Jane, which Jane was like, goes to talk to Frank, which kind of reiterated what I figured out last episode. And it made me feel even more like an idiot. It's like this entire time it's been staring me in the face, and I didn't realize it. Now, I think the reason why is because we haven't seen Jane in a very long time. The last time we saw Jane was like, kind of like, what was that? Probably like, maybe like episode 3 or episode 4, maybe? And The Wizard's Past was like 2 or 3 episodes ago. So, and we hadn't seen her in a while. So I guess it just didn't click in my head. But not till last episode seeing her again, I was like, right, Jane. And then it finally clicked in. So I will slightly forgive myself, but I'm still a complete idiot for not figuring that out sooner. I'm just like, it's right there in front of my face. But she goes to him because it's like, hey, don't kill Langwidere, because it's like, you know, she basically brings up the fact is like, you sent me off here because like I'm one of the few people that knows your secret, and you don't kill me because you know that I can be useful. I mean, because the reason why Frank basically put her in that position isn't like, I think more so than anything, I think Frank wants her alive, because Frank needs her alive so he can feel superior, because he always felt like she was putting him down, because the one person he cared about was Karen. That was the only person he really cared about. You could argue that, truth be told, is like Dorothy's dad, he was probably envious of him because, you know, him and, you know, Karen. So maybe, I don't know, but definitely when it came to Jane, because he didn't like Jane because it's like, oh, she was bossy, she never treated him with respect. It's like, you know, because he's like, oh, I'm such a smart person, yet you treated me like I was just an assistant. But she's basically like, that's all you were. I was treating you with the position that you were in. And he's even like, when we came to Oz, you kind of downplayed me, like, you know, I was the great and powerful, you wouldn't let me rise to my true potential. So that's what this comes down to. It's her pride that she didn't treat him right. And it's like, it's all about, you know, he just wants to show off, flaunt off just how great and powerful I am, the great and powerful Wizard of Oz, even getting pissed and like, shut your mouth. You better not ever call me Frank again. I am the Wizard of Oz to you. If you do this again, I will kill Langwidere. And so, you know, Jack, wanting to protect her, he fired a gun, like a bullet at her, but like you see her looking at him and almost saying, like, telling everyone not to do anything. And basically, Jack, the bullet, it seemed more like, I don't think Jack, I was actually worried about, I was like, Jack's going to mess up and shoot her because he's never aimed a gun before, which might be what happened, but to me, it looks like the wizard kind of pushed her in front of the way to kind of catch the bullet, which she dies, and Jack heartbroken about it, because it's like, for one, he's the one that killed her, plus he didn't treat her 100% right. Like when she was asking him, like, would he stay for her, like if he was free, and he kind of turned his back on her, so I'm sure that kind of hurts him a little bit too. But even Jane explains, like, hey, in her own way, you know, she tried to love you the best she can, and she's like, I can't bring her back. He's like, well, you did it with me. He's like, you were alive at that time, but she's not. And then we get the big reveal that, oh, that's because Langwidere is not alive. She hasn't been for a very, very long time. She actually died during the Beast attack, when the Beast Forever attacked last time. The only person that survived amongst the royal family was her dad. And her dad, being so heartbroken, was like, no, keep my daughter alive. So basically, she replaced a lot of parts, similar to what she did to Jack. But I think Jack is probably more human. At least he has probably more, I mean, maybe. I could be 100% wrong, but it seems like Jack might be more human than she is. Probably because, like, at the time she was dead. So Jack at least had probably some living parts left. So, I mean, yeah, definitely, because, like, the other part of his body, because, like, you know, the other side of his body is flesh, you know, while the other side is tin. And, you know, Jane's like, oh, I can fix her, which upsets Jack, because it's like, I thought I was a real boy, and now I find out, like, not even she was. This woman I was in love with, like, wasn't real at all either. It's like, we're just things. We're not even people. Which Jane is trying to be like, no, you're much more than that. You're not just things, because she's talking about she can actually repair Langwidere. So that's cool. I mean, at least she's not dead. I was like, because I was super bummed if she died, but it's like, no, she's alive. And finally get an explanation of why she wears all those masks. It's because she isn't human. She wouldn't age. So basically, she had to create all those different masks. Well, to hide the fact is that she had such a young face forever, and people would have started asking questions if they saw her face. So that's kind of the big secret she was keeping. I was like, that's a really good reason for those masks. I like that reason a lot, dude. That's really good. But now you have Jack being super pissed, and he's like, basically, he's going to get revenge. Because basically, none of this would happen if it wasn't for the wizard. Like, yes, he blames himself, but he was trying to protect her, but none of this would have happened. Even finding out the truth, he probably would have been happy never knowing the truth about her, but now he knows it, and it's like, he's just angry because it's like, now he realizes just nothing was real. He wasn't real. Him and Langwidere weren't real either. It's like, she's a monster. I know, like, every time I say her name, I always say it weird. I just can't help it. Like, I guarantee you I've never said her name right, just because I'm always, like, changing up the way I say it. I know, like, that time I couldn't even help it because I was struggling through it while I was saying it. I just couldn't help it. Like, I have to bring attention to stuff like that, because I have to point out every little thing I do wrong, because I'm my biggest critic about it like that. I know it's a terrible thing, a terrible habit I have, but nevertheless. So, just on a kick for revenge now, so... on the other side of the story, we had the whole Tip situation, whereas Tip, kind of channels some of the magic. Well, she had originally got West off her, situation. Basically, he's like, hey, get your crap together. I can't do this alone. Your sister's inside of me saying, like, get off your lazy ass and get to work. And so, I don't know whether that's something like, I guess that was something she herself did. Like, basically, she reclosed the wounds on her arms, even sucking the blood back in, it seemed like. So I was wondering if it was going to be something like Tip did to her, but it seems like that was definitely something West did to herself, so that's good. And tapping into her powers a little bit, Tip turns herself back into a boy, which West obviously has her biggest problem. She's like, how did you do that? She's like, yeah, I just did it. It's what I wanted, which West isn't happy about, because she's basically explains it to her. You can't do this. You want revenge, right? Well, you won't be able to get it as a boy, because Ozma was a girl. You were born a girl. Yes, you might be comfortable as a boy, but the fact of the matter is, no one's going to follow you, because no one's going to believe you're Ozma because you're around as a boy. But for Tip, it's like, no, being a boy is all I've ever known. Yes, I might have been born a girl, but I lived most of my life as a boy. This is the skin I was born in. This is the face I had. This is everything that was me. And she's like, basically, like, you don't know what it feels like to kind of be in someone else's skin, is kind of what it felt like for her, kind of being someone else, which I guess to an extent Wes can kind of understand, because it's like she's kind of been kind of crawling out of her own skin ever since the last attack that led with all her sisters being killed. Like, she's been trying to be someone else, so she knows what it is. It's kind of like living in someone else's skin, because she's living in the skin of the person she used to be, which she even comments to Tip later on, like, oh yeah, in some circles they used to refer to me as the Wicked Witch of the West. I like that a lot. And then, but fortunately for her, no green skin, which is kind of interesting. Once again, bringing back my knowledge of Oz. That was a thing in the Great and Powerful Oz, the movie with James Franco. Had a whole bunch of people, like Mila Kunis played the Wicked Witch of the West, didn't she? Yeah. And at least I think she did. Yeah, definitely, because she was the one that ended, like, she started off having normal skin, but then as things changed, her anger and envy kind of took over, jealousy and stuff took over, and she started turning green. So I'm wondering, is that something that's going to happen to West later on or not? Maybe it'll be something that never happens. I feel like that seems like that's going to be the obvious route, just because it's like, I feel like they're going to be dead set on doing that. I mean, now that I'm bringing it up, I also forget, I do also know, I didn't even think about it, because I guess because it's coming back like in like 2 weeks, but once upon a time, like, Zelena, is the Wicked Witch, from Oz, so I do have that as another reference from, but obviously, like, Once Upon a Time, it's kind of its own thing, it pulls from different versions of stories and just kind of does its own things with things, so, but nevertheless, like I said, it's understandable why Tip is mad. At first, Wes is like, okay, you can stay as a boy, and she's like, thanks for understanding. And so basically they end up gathering up the other witches that were sealed within the abject. It's like, well, they can do it now because Tip has access to all of Mistress Issa's spells. So of the spells she used to unlock the abject are now access to her. So got a lot of the witches free, at least the ones that were able, the ones that were still in good health and or weren't dead. But at first they're like, no, we're not going to help you because there's no way that's Ozma. It's like a dagger doesn't mean jack squat. Plus she's a boy. It's like, plus they don't like West either because it's like, you betrayed us, you turned your back on us, you try to dull your pain after everything that happened. It's like, she, like anyone, like, because even Tip defends her being like, yeah, she was weak, but who we all are at different points in time. Is like, she was in a rough spot, she lost all of her sisters, she blamed herself, she felt alone, didn't have her mother, didn't really have anyone to kind of help her. That's why I'm very interested, like, what was really her relationship with East? She makes it seem like East was the only one that she was really close to, because she's definitely not close to Glinda. But it's like, and it does make you wonder, like, before all that happened, I wonder will we ever get a look at that? Like, what was it like before, like, their relationships, like, growing up and stuff like that? When it came to their mother and everything. Were they happy together? Were they just indifferent towards each other? Was it always West and East, or were they all kind of pretty tight all together? Stuff like that. But basically the witches wanted to punish her. They went as far as sewing her mouth, and it's like, oh, she's got to pay for her treachery. The fact is that she wasn't there because it was actually East to seal them up, but it's like, oh, West is just as guilty because her and her sisters are kind of always done their own thing. I mean, granted, I don't know if mainly because they submitted to the wizard's rules, so it's kind of like you're traitors in that sense. So I'm sure in that same regard, Glinda's just as guilty as West is. Even though it was East who sealed them away under the wizard's order, they're still all guilty by association because it's like you all worked for him, so type of situation is even going as far as like, oh yeah, you became the wizard's whore, where she was like, I'm no one's whore. So like I said, like when you break it down, like I think out of any one, like West easily has one of the saddest stories because the fact is that she drowns herself in that world, drowned herself in drugs and stuff, getting high just so she can numb the pain, forget the memories of all the sisters she lost when the Beast Forever attacked last time. Like I said, in the form, because it was also in the form of water, so they also drowned. So that's like I brought up last time. Whenever, like, was that last time or the episode before last? Nevertheless, it's like all your sisters drowning like that. That's pretty rough. But to prove a point, Tip turns back into her girl form and it's like, hey, we need to join together, stop the wizard because he's the one that created all these problems in the first place. Let's rise together and, fight together, because she was able to use her magic to basically make them all see her memories. And that's not something that can be faked. Those are memories from her perspective as a baby. So now that they saw that and saw what she could do, it's like now she's leading the troops. So that's very interesting. I'm very, like, when it all comes down to it, when it's all said and done, I'll go ahead and bring it up. But it's like, what side will everyone be on? Obviously, you have Glinda's side and you have the wizard's side. But then at the same time, it's like, where does like Tip and West fall onto that? Because obviously West and Tip want to take down the wizard, but do they want to work with Glinda? Like, I mean, West has her issues with Glinda, but for her, it's kind of a situation like, oh, I got to work with my sister. This is the proof of point. This is to save all witches, to all protect us because the wizard needs to be stopped. He's controlling us for too long. It's time for magic to reign supreme again. But you have like someone like Dorothy. Dorothy's main goal is to stop the war. She doesn't want anyone to fight. She's not on the wizard's side. She's not on Glinda's side. But in a sense, it does seem like she is aiming to fight Glinda more than she is the wizard. Granted, she is hearing more about the wizard and kind of realizing like, oh yeah, he is kind of a jerk. But I think Glinda's more her reason to fight because Glinda's using children, like Sophie, which last episode we found out her real name is Leith and everything. So because of that, it's like, yes, the wizard's a danger, but Glinda is too because she will be willing to let anyone die just for the purposes of winning this war, because sacrifice as many as you need, because there will be need to be sacrifices in this war to prove a point. It's the only way for witches to kind of end back up on top. At least my mindset on it. Obviously, Dorothy's whole thing with Rowan went down, which Rowan, still has a conflicted heart, and it got to the point that he was going to kill her, which he was like, stop me, because he's like, this is the only way, because I guess for him, it's like he's still driven by that conflicted heart, and he knows that there's always, even though he doesn't want to do this, there's a part of him that wants to as a means of getting rid of her from his heart. So he's like, get hurt, do stop me. So she stabs him in the side. She could have done more, but even then, like Dorothy didn't want to hurt him or kill him. So what she does is she straps him to like one the cross that you would put like a scarecrow on, and hoist him up, and he's up there wounded. And she's like, "You got what you wanted. You wanted to have never met me, and now your life is back to how basically how they first met. Him wounded and stuck, hung up like a scarecrow." It's sad that it came down to that. I was hoping on everything that Lucas would kind of snap to it and just be like, "No, I can't hurt you," and then just kind of go back to being Lucas. But I guess, at least for now, there's no going back for him, because that's all he's stuck as Lucas and Rowan at the same time. Those two people existing at once. So. And so it's kind of interesting because now Dorothy goes full circle. She goes back to the village, the tribe lands when she first came to Oz, and ends up wanting to release Nahara, the woman who, obviously that the wizard wanted her. That's the whole reason why he wanted ace spells, because the only person that can remove the power of the abject is Ace, because that was her spell that originally sealed them. Dorothy went to go help them, which I was wondering, would she ever actually be able to do it? Because it's like, I feel like you need to know a certain spell, but I guess since she has East gauntlets, that would have done it. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I guess so. I guess her gauntlets would act as a substitute for not knowing the exact spell, or maybe the exact spells were kind of in the memories of the gauntlets, or tied to them at the very least. But obviously most of them were freed by West. The rest, any that were left, were those who were sick / dying or already dead. And Nahara ends up being one of the former who's sick and dying. Because originally Dorothy was like, "I'm going to free everyone." She's trying to do a good job. You gotta remember, she is a nurse, so she doesn't want to go out of her way to hurt people. She wants to free everyone, because for her, she also makes a promise, because Nahara is kind of like, "No, let the war come," because it's like, oh, Glinda's raising an army, and she'll kind of put magic, because magic is all that Oz is. And it was always a big part of Oz until the wizard came, and then he complicated things because he got so focused on, because it became like, oh, like he couldn't have anything standing in his way, because it's like, oh, he's a scientist and I'm super smart and everything, just to prove a point. And he shut down magic because magic got in the way. It's like, no, magic isn't important. What's important is science, because I'm here bringing science to you. I'm important, not magic. I'm important. Forget magic, forget even science. Science is important because it makes me important. That's all that really came down. It's like, oh, magic isn't anything. I can create wonders here in Oz. That's all this was. Like I said, it's so interesting from a certain perspective, looking at it like the wizard is just a big baby. He just wants attention. He wants to feel powerful. He wants to feel important, because that's not what he ever felt like in his life. Which, yeah, I get it. Everyone's got that moment where they want to feel special and important, but he went to such degree hurting and killing and imprisoning so many people just for, it's not like their magic was necessarily doing anything. He did it to prove a point. His whole reign is under a facade, because he makes it seem like, oh, he's the one that brought the stone giants, whereas we know Nahara is the one who did it, and it was a secret that everyone had to keep, because Nahara being in prison is the only thing that kept their village alive, so he ruled with an iron fist, and you saw what he was doing with Langwidere, and what he did to Tip's parents is like he ruled with an iron fist, and it's just to keep up his facade and this lie, to keep up this image of being powerful, to destroy anyone that would contradict him and get in his way. He killed a lot of people. So it's so interesting. Like, I started off being like, oh man, the wizard, I don't know if he's a good guy or a bad guy. Maybe he's just a misinformed. No. It's straight up, no, he's a bad guy. But once again, like I brought up last episode, Glinda's not that much better. It's like Glinda's more in the right than the wizard is, but at the same time, it's like she's still not 100% in the right herself. It's a situation where you can see both sides' opinions. Like, granted, I can't side with anything the wizard does. Like, even being like, oh, there's a good perspective. It's like, no, there's no good to what he does. But even Glinda, there is at least some good behind why she's doing it. It's to protect other future witches and stuff, kind of bring Oz back to the way it was before. But it also begs the question, we don't really know what Oz was like before, like under their rule, witches kind of being at the top. It seemed like witches were kind of praised, so maybe they weren't necessarily evil. They were just kind of indifferent. It's like, we're here, we're doing our thing, We're not going to hurt people. I mean, to our knowledge, like I said, we haven't really dived too deeply into the past of Oz. What I'm also curious about is that dude that Dorothy ended up saving. It looked like he looked like his skin was ripped off and he was sealed inside of the tree, because even Nahara was like, yeah, he's been here longer than anyone else. So even before they were imprisoned by East, he was there. So, and the fact is he attacked Ojo to get away, even though they were willing to help him. Now, to me, I interpret that as like, okay, so we're already setting up our new main antagonist. That's all I can think. It's like he's the next bad guy or something. I mean, maybe that'll turn out not to be the case, but it seemed like right now it's like, yeah, we're setting up our next antagonist, especially because next week's episode is, in fact, the season finale. I thought so. I was like, I thought I remembered it only being 10 episodes. So I didn't watch any. I called glimpses of the preview, but it's like, no, I didn't want to, I've been doing with everything lately, just trying to be going into it with as little information possible. But I did to make sure it was the season finale, which it is, and it's going to be a crazy episode. War is literally there. Everyone's arming up. The witches are arming up. The wizard, I mean, really, the kingdom of Ev is got all the guns. The wizard's kind of about to be executed, but then it stops because they see the stone giant, and now you have Dorothy being there. Which Dorothy made a promise, because the whole thing about like Nahara wanting magic to kind of reign back supreme with Oz. So she was like, okay, when I go back home, I'm gonna bring the wizard with me, because I mean that way you don't have to worry about him anymore. I mean, the thing is, with someone like him, there's no guarantee. Like, because I'm wondering how this is all going to tie back to the beginning, too, because we also ask some questions like, who are those people that were after Dorothy's mom? Who are those cops? Because obviously they weren't regular cops. Maybe obviously I brought up before, I think they're people from Oz who were sent to kill her, because maybe Frank felt like she was too much of a threat or something. Like I brought up before, like, why did he let Karen go? I can only assume it's because he has feelings for Karen, so he didn't want to kill her. But it's like, I'm sure even she got in his way, just like Jane did. But nevertheless, it's going to be a very interesting episode. Like I said, everyone's arming up. Dorothy's got a stone giant on her side. What does that mean? It seems like more so she's siding with the wizard, not necessarily because she wants to, because it's probably the situation where the least amount of bloodshed will happen. Because he's the only one that can get her home too, so she needs to be on his good side. More so than anything, her point is to stop the war so that no one dies or anyone. None of that happens, but we do have the stone giant, and we see Dorothy kind of walking on the field. So I'm super excited to find out how this all turns out in the season finale next week. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.